From an early age we knew that our son was different, a very unique child. It was hard to put your finger on exactly how and why he varied from the norm, but average he certainly wasn't. As an eternal optimist I saw much promise, hoping that maturity would shape and mould his traits into life skills that would stand him in good stead. He had drive, determination and single-mindedness, and this is the stuff that achievers are made of. Couple these with his social skills, imagination and energy, and you could have the recipe for ultimate success. Give it time, I thought. Work through the terrible 2 stage and things will start to fall into place. They didn't. Many around us started to suggest autism or ADHD, but these only ever partially fitted, and intuitively they were labels that just did not feel right. These were things that reminded us of these difficulties, but there was too much that any potential diagnosis didn't explain. So we carried on regardless, reluctant to seek a label and pigeonhole our son into an ill-fitting disorder, and thereby handicapping him with an inappropriate tag for life. As he started school, we couldn't really say that he was behind his peers, but he was very different. He was not so much lacking in skills, but had different skills and sensitivities. He was a playground maverick, slightly quirky, temperamental, and an extremely difficult nonconformist. It was felt by school that he didn't fall into special needs, but was at the extreme edge of what could be expected. He was exceptional rather than special. As time went by, problems increased. Good parenting and in-school strategies designed to address difficulties seemed to make matters worse rather than better. Getting it right was a hit-and-miss process and contravened most of the received wisdom on how to raise a child. What should work didn't, but the illogical did. As things deteriorated further, we revisited the possibility of an underlying problem, but once again nothing seemed to fit the bill. The child we had presented as a mixture of a number of problems, an alchemist's brew of difficulties borrowed from a number of recognised syndromes. It seemed that even to the professionals he was a cause for concern, but also remained an enigmatic puzzle. After working with mental health professionals for a year or so, we were no closer to a watertight explanation. Little fitted, and what did fit didn't help or provide guidance to the support that was required. Regrettably, we found that certain support agencies compounded the problems and were responsible for muddying the water in the assessment process. Confessions that we found our son hard to manage were interpreted as due to poor parenting skills rather than a measure of the severity of the problem. The fact that we were raising an older child without similar issues was ignored, and it suited some parties' perceptions to believe that parents, rather than professional opinions, were at fault. To be fair, many individuals were supportive and did seek to determine the nature of the underlying causes, but multi-agency involvement and some zealous personal interpretations made it hard to discern between causative and consequential difficulties. Eventually, the intensity of the investigation stepped up a level with the involvement of a regional team of child and adolescent mental health specialists, and I began to trawl the internet for answers. By coincidence, I stumbled across Pathological Demand Avoidance Syndrome just a day or two before it was suggested to us as a possible diagnosis. Wow, what a revelation! For the first time we had found something that described our son to a T and could have been written specifically for him. However, it was not merely a label. It also, for the first time, provided an explanation of what was going on and confirmed things that we had already discovered through years of trial and error. As a label, it did not just say what was in the tin, but it also provided us with understanding as well as pointing us towards appropriate strategies to help and manage our child. Without this, a diagnostic label is of limited value. There are a number of potential disorders that could cause your child to present with some behaviours similar to PDA. For this reason, it is important that any diagnosis is provided by an experienced professional, ideally through play-based assessments and with detailed consideration of the child's developmental history. PDA may remind people of other problems or even look very similar to another disorder, but typically these disorders will require very different approaches and handling. For the person with PDA, the wrong approaches can be ineffective and often actually make the situation worse. If your child has PDA, there is nothing else quite like it, and in the remainder of this video we will take a look at the 8 diagnostic criteria as identified by Professor Elizabeth Newson. Criteria 1. Passive early history in first year. By passive we don't necessarily mean placid. What we do mean is that they are passive in their engagement with the world around them. For example, a child may be reluctant to reach out for things, waiting for an item to be given to them, and then they may drop the same item in a very disinterested way. It may come across as if everything is just too much effort for them, and they need to be spoon-fed everything. To parents, it may appear as though they can't be bothered or are just plain lazy. Developmental milestones may be delayed, initially being slow to talk or walk, but then catching up rapidly. In around 50% of children, crawling is late or absent, and they may go straight from being an occasional bottom shuffler to walking almost overnight. As more demands are made, they become more actively passive, strongly resisting or objecting to normal demands. And yet there are some that are actively resistant right from the start, with everything needing to be carried out strictly on their terms. Most children will need handling with velvet gloves, but otherwise they appear to be normal. Typically, parents learn to adapt so completely to their child's needs and style that significant problems at nursery or preschool can come as a surprise. To professional eyes, the child may be puzzling, but not regarded as abnormal. Criteria 2. Continues to resist and avoid the ordinary demands of life. This is the defining characteristic of PDA. They seem to feel under intolerable pressure from the normal expectations placed on young children and devote themselves to actively resisting these. Their demand avoidance may appear to be their greatest talent, and when avoidant they may show real social and cognitive skill. The avoidance of demands can be an almost obsessional preoccupation, dominating every aspect of their lives. As children develop language skills, their strategies for avoidance are essentially socially manipulative, often carefully adapted to maximise effect on the adult involved. Children are inventive and do use a wide variety of strategies. A child may use distraction to turn your attention from the demand or instruction that you have just given, possibly exploiting one of your interests. "That's a pretty necklace you're wearing, Mummy," or "Look out the window, there's a cat in the garden." They may even drop something or accidentally knock something over. In short, they would do or say anything to divert your attention from following through with the demand. At other times they may acknowledge the demand but find a way to excuse themselves from it. "I'm sorry, but I need to finish what I'm doing," or "I'm afraid I've got to get something from my bedroom. I don't know how to do it. Mummy wouldn't like me to do that." Otherwise, it could be a straight refusal such as, "No, you can't make me," or "I don't have to do that." Another strategy is to incapacitate themselves, perhaps by hiding behind a curtain or underneath a table. They may claim to be too tired or have achy legs, go floppy, burst into tears, undress or tell you that they are disabled and that their arms don't work. PDA children do have active imaginations, often lost in fantasy. This too can provide a means for avoiding a demand. A child may answer demands indirectly by talking to or through their toys. "Eddie said he wants me to stay with him," or "My dollies wouldn't like me to do that." Others may be so absorbed in a character role they will only respond to you if you address them as their alter ego, and then they would respond in character. "I'm a Labrador, dogs don't have to go to bed." Or the same child may just bark or growl in reply, behaving exactly as a dog would. For others, it is merely that they are so absorbed by their play that a mission or game task is too important to interrupt. For example, a toy fire engine may have to finish putting out a fire. Not to do so would be a real risk to the safety of the others in the game. Fantasy has the same urgency to them as a real-life situation. If a demand persists or alternative strategies are not available, a child may drown out a request by talking over them, humming, singing meaningless noises or shouting. Some will place their hands over their ears to shut out a demand or bury their heads under a duvet or a cushion. As a last resort, children will scream, paddy, hit, kick, bite, losing control in what can be extremely aggressive and violent outrages. These are best seen and understood as panic attacks.